boys and girls of the world of the Talking Blue Tank Engine. I want to sincerely apologize for taking this long to get this review out. As I've stated in my recent update video, these last few months have absolutely sucked. As you know, I cut ties with two individuals at the beginning of the year, which followed up to me being away from home to take care of my grandmother right up until she passed away last month. Since her death, we've been clearing out her house of whatever junk or personal materials we wanted to keep, and we're also currently in the process of arranging her memorial. It's still been pretty rough for me and my family, but we're hanging in there the best we can. And in other news, some more BS befell us, as some of you may or may not have been subbed to my other group channel, Irwin Media, which is now first and foremost tarnished. Long story short, the person in charge of the channel, me and a close friend recently cut ties with as we were tired of being lied to, their obnoxious behavior and overall rudeness to newcomers, and the overall trash talking about others within the server was highly uncalled for, and no matter how many times we called them out, they never changed for the better. Which is also ironic because the two individuals I just mentioned, they were also caught in the crossfire and are now back in our circle of friends. We were not going to stand behind a pathological liar and psychopath, so we did what we had to do. And after all that, I just couldn't find a spare moment to work on all the projects I had planned. For a while, I did lose that motivational spark, but don't worry, I'm going to try and step it up as fast as I can to get back on track before I disappear again for the summer. With all that out of the way, as you saw, I'm doing another double review, but with a twist. This time, it's one DVD, one VHS, consisting of CGI and newer models. That may sound like an odd combination, but I think you guys are going to be satisfied. So even though it isn't Christmas anymore, let's start off with Santa's Little Engine. Santa's Little Engine was released on DVD by Lionsgate on October 8, 2013. This DVD features 4 episodes from the 17th season, as well as one additional from the 13th. The US, Canadian, Thai, and Malaysian DVDs got a total of 5 episodes, while the UK and Australian DVDs got an additional 3 from season 17. With this new season, this was the beginning when Mark Morahan took over as the show's new narrator. Here's something funny. When I first heard Mark narrate some of these stories, he very weirdly sounded a lot like Angelus, to the point where I was actually convinced it was him for some time. That could have been just my ears playing tricks on me, but I can't be the only one who thought that. But other than that, that's it. There's nothing else to say within this history.
That was short.
Thank God these don't have a elongated release history like the previous ones do, so now these will be a breeze. Anyways, let's move on to the episodes. So Santa's Little Engine features 5 wintry themed episodes, all narrated by new narrator Mark Morahan, plus some added bonuses throughout the course of the DVD. Santa's Little Engine, No Snow for Thomas, The Frozen Turntable, The Missing Christmas Decorations, and Snow Tracks. So let us begin with our first episode, Santa's Little Engine. But before you do that, make sure you skip over the Calling All Engines segment right at the start, unless you feel like hearing facts about the engines that we already don't know.
Gordon is a big engine.
No shit.
Moving on. The Earl of Sodor is hosting a big Christmas fair at Ulstead Castle and requests Sir Topham Hatt to dress up as Santa Claus. This also requires him to drive a sleigh, which has Topham worried. On the last day of the fair, disaster strikes when Thomas accidentally bumps into the sleigh and sends Topham down the icy hill. It's then up to Thomas to catch the runaway sleigh and bring it back to the children. Right off the bat, this episode is an awesome way to kick off this DVD. More so the fact it's another SDH-centered story. The idea of him dressing up as Santa but terrified to drive a sleigh for the first time is kinda silly. Even the shenanigans he does to try and avoid the whole sleigh thing is even sillier. And let it be known, poor Winston just takes it all in. Poor guy. Also, leave it to the typical Earl to be completely oblivious to the whole sleigh thing, despite how Topham feels about it. Because let me ask this, where the hell did he find quote-unquote reindeer at this time? It's almost as if he expects Topham to just know this on the fly. Sometimes this man just... ugh. Anyway, by far my favorite part of the episode is when Thomas accidentally bumps the sleigh and Topham flies down the hill, which is pretty exciting. Leading up to Thomas looking like an actual reindeer, which I gotta admit, he does look pretty cute like that. And let's not forget the little nod they gave to Thomas in inspiration of the episode Buzz Buzz. Now it is officially Thomas the Red-Nosed Engine. Make room, James.
Hey.
More or less, this episode is definitely one of my personal favorites from season 17, and I feel like it rightfully deserves a 10 out of 10. Just before we discuss the next story, we have this lovely signal box scene with Mr. Perkins, who reads us the Railway series story of the Flying Kipper. Here's a little piece of advice. Don't ever skip a Mr. Perkins story. I'm warning you, don't do it! Nah, I'm only teasing. But in all seriousness, I really like the way he tells these stories. He sounds like he's having a lot of fun, he has energy and enthusiasm, and you can really tell that he's actually into it. Quite frankly, why didn't they get him to narrate some of these CGI stories? I think they would have been a little more interesting. It's just a shame, though, that we lost this good-hearted soul. Rest in peace, Ben. But continuing now with our second episode, we have No Snow for Thomas. Cheeky Thomas doesn't want to wear his snowplow, so he hides it in a siding. With no snowplow, Thomas has to stay in the sheds while Emily clears his branch line. She then gets to take Annie and Clarabelle out, which upsets Thomas, and when he tries to go and look for his plow, Thomas ends up getting stuck in the thick snow. Well, compared to the last episode, this one is not as good. I'd say it's okay at best. Some might say this episode is boring, which I kinda get. And upon further analysis, this plotline is a bit similar to Thomas Terrence in the Snow, as well as Thomas Emily in the Snowplow. All three have something in common, Thomas finding whichever way to not wear his snowplow. And that's at least one of two positives that I can give this episode. One of them, the nod to Thomas's classic persona, him tricking his crew into thinking his plow doesn't fit and cheekily getting out of work, only for it all to bite him in the buffers afterwards, seems like a typical Thomas trick. And compared to at least the Hit Era episode, Emily isn't a bitch in this one. The other positive I can give is the animation. To me, the scenes with the snow look a lot more realistic than, say, what came from the earlier CGI episodes. Even when it's piling up around Thomas, it still looks really nice in some way. So again, while this episode isn't as amazing as the last, I still think it's a pretty okay story. I rank this a 7.5 out of 10. And then we get pulled away to some stupid question game by the Earl based off of Toby's New Whistle and Tickle Pink. Your best bet is to just skip this game entirely. Do not put yourself through this ridiculously dumbass torture unless, according to the game, you're paying really close attention to answers to such easy questions.
Can you remember what color James was painted?
I think he was green in this episode!
You moron.
So now we come to our third episode, the Frozen Turntable. The turntable at Tin's sheds freezes over, which forces the engines to sleep in different sheds. Typical Gordon thinks he's too important to sleep anywhere else and sneaks back. Much to his dismay, he is then trapped the whole next day while the turntable is still under repair. This is an episode that's just balancing between okay and eh. No surprise, but Gordon gets on my nerves here too. For one, complaining about only one berth being available and wanting to claim it for his own. Just find a place and go the to sleep! Also, his excuses as to why he can't sleep in certain places are lame as hell.
I'm not sleeping at the search and rescue center. It will be far too noisy if there's an emergency and the alarm goes off. The steamworks always makes me think of breaking down. I'm quite sure I wouldn't get any sleep at all. I'm not sleeping at the diesel works. It's too oily, and I don't like the smell of their fuel.
Meanwhile, don't you love how supposedly all the engines agree to let Percy sleep in the one berth, and minutes later, here's Gordon being selfish and taking Percy's spot? Yeah, Percy, I feel you too, dude. I wouldn't want to argue with Gordon when I'm that tired either. And oh my god, is he self-centered about it.
I really should ask Sir Topham Hatt to give me a shed of my own. It's much more peaceful without all those other engines chattering and making noise.
Wow. I guess the only part of this episode I actually like is how Gordon gets stuck in the shed like a dumbass, but also gets the wonderful privilege of taking the mail train. All I can say to that is, that's what you get for being a selfish prick, Gordon.
Oh, the indignity.
With that all in mind, I don't think this episode is great, but I don't think it's terrible either. I've seen worse Gordon stories. I can tolerate it for the most part, but not by very much, because it's Gordon. The most I'm gonna rank this episode is a 6 out of 10. Yet again, we get the same signal box scene with Mr. Perkins, but this time we see him answering a letter from someone wanting to know more about Sodor's history. He then writes about the history of Ulstead Castle, which really isn't all that interesting, being that it's just facts we already know from King of the Railway. I don't really care all that much for these particular segments. They're not terrible by any means, but I personally can't be bothered to sit through them. Which then brings us to our next episode, the missing Christmas decorations. The Diesels are jealous that the steam engines have more decorations than they do, so Diesel 10 begins to steal the decorations from Tidmouth and brings them back to the Diesel Works. When he tries to steal for the third time, Percy catches him in the act and all the engines chase him back to the Diesel Works to retrieve their stolen decorations. Now we pick things up again with another really good episode. Everybody hustling around during the Christmas holiday, all the decorations are out, and holy sh** on a crabapple, Diesel 10 is back! Well, hot damn, it's been a minute since we last saw him. Last appearance was way back in Day of the Diesels, and some fans either liked or didn't like the way he was portrayed. Was it any different here? Not really. He's still the same devious character he's always been, but how it's demonstrated here is, again, very silly. Like, all this fuss is over the fact that the Diesel Works hardly have any decorations compared to the engines? Really? And since when the hell does he care about Christmas this much? Hell, even Diesel, when that takes a complete 180 episodes way later on. I mean, think about it. To go this far to steal decorations coming from the mindset of everyone liking steamies better than diesels. Seriously, I thought we were over this back from Day of the Diesels? Hello? Did you all forget that? Also, did anyone ever realize that Diesel 10 has a very similar horn sound like two other familiar characters from another show?
Make me.
Ironic, isn't it? What I also find a bit confusing is how there's Sydney just dangling there minding his own business. Meanwhile, he's been there, what, 2 years? Funny, cause isn't that when Day of the Diesels was released? So if that was the case, then wouldn't he have made at least a small cameo appearance, or at least some kind of gimmick that he was going to at least be introduced in the Nitrogen era and not kept up till now to finally have a role?
My brain hurts now.
Anyway, despite these little nitpicks I've got, I think this is still a very entertaining episode to watch. The most I'd say this deserves is an 8 out of 10. Our last activity is Sir Topham giving out clues for us to guess which engine he's describing, followed by a quickie flashback moment to said engine. This game is pretty okay. The clips they use are quite nice, and they make good snippets for music videos. I leave that up to you whether or not to sit through them, or just completely skip. Which brings us to our final episode, the re-narrated Snow Tracks. Gordon is assigned to take some cars to the docks, but is warned to not go up any hills. As usual, Gordon ignores the warnings and soon finds himself in trouble when a giant snowball rolls down his hill and crashes into Thomas. I expect some of you are thinking I'm really going to dock points here, solely because this is a nitrogen episode. Well, this may shock all of you, but oh my god, a Gordon episode I actually like! This story is actually written really well, and even though Brandon's narration is decent in the first take, there's something about the way Mark tells this story that, oddly enough, seems like it would fit this era. This makes me wish that maybe Mark should have re-narrated some more of these earlier Nitrogen era stories. But back on topic, in typical fashion, I'm really not surprised that Gordon ignored everyone about going up the icy hills, as we've seen him do acts like this previously in other episodes. Normally, that would make me angry, given also the fact that this is a 3-strike rule story. However, it's not that badly written. Even though what Gordon does is dumb, it's not to the point where I want to rip my hair out. Because there's actually some things in this story that make me laugh, like Spencer being sprayed with snow, Gordon's face being covered up, and even Thomas looking like a giant snowball. It's also nice to see Gordon try to step in and rescue Thomas, but even admits in some situations he's not the strongest. Although that logic gets completely tossed out after this episode, so what's the point? This is probably one of the very few episodes from the Nitrogen era that actually got the original characteristics for Gordon correct. I'm picking up a bit of that United We Stand, Together We Fall vibe after this. Somebody was actually paying the hell attention. It's good, give or take, for a Nitrogen episode. It's just not over the top amazing, but I do think it's decent enough to earn an 8 out of 10. So what do I think of Santa's Little Engine? Well, for the season's first winter-themed release, it's pretty good. Actually, it's my favorite DVD from season 17. What they were going for ended up being a pretty solid release. Now, I know there's probably some fans who don't care for some of these episodes, and I'm kind of picking up that vibe from ones like No Snow for Thomas, Frozen Turntable, and Snow Tracks specifically. Honestly, good or bad, however you want to look at them, I think they're passable enough. I can at least get some entertainment with these, as well as the other stories. Andrew Brenner, as well as Paul Larson and Laura Beaumont, were on point when writing these stories, for the most part. And while I'm not a fan of some of the more degrading in-between segments, there are some that I do like, which does save this DVD for me. This is one CGI DVD that I would totally recommend getting for any Thomas collection. And now, with the first release said and done, it's time to move on to our next review, with Songs from the Station. Songs from the Station was released on VHS and DVD on May 3rd, 2005 by Hit Entertainment. It was also redistributed by 20th Century Fox sometime in 2006, which I should point out is a very rare variant. As we all know, this was another of those 60-year Thomas releases celebrating the Railway series. So like Sodor Celebration, a silver anniversary Percy was released with the tape and DVD. Of course, this was not the only way to get this release, as this included the bonus Wooden Railway and either double, triple, or quadruple DVD packs. Here's a fun fact. This was actually the very last sing-along release made in the US, as the songs would either be featured in or separate from the releases. Now let's take a look at the bonus features. On the US DVD, we get the Great Destinations of Sodor game, where Thomas talks about some of the greatest destinations on Sodor, a read-along adapted from Thomas and the Magic Railroad, as well as hit extras, sneak peeks, and web fun. My favorite game on this release is Songs of Sodor, another game that's pretty straightforward. You guess 4 notes correctly from whatever engine, and they play a snippet instrumental from one of 3 songs. Like the Storybook Adventure game, I used to play this one a lot too. I always loved listening to the instrumentals, particularly Determination, because not gonna lie, that song kinda slaps, without the lyrics of course. Alright, well now that we've covered yet another release with not a very long history, let's move on to the episodes and songs. So Songs from the Station features 8 sing-along songs, followed by 2 episodes from Season 8. Sounds: Emily, Thomas and the Tuba, Surprises, A World Around You, Determination, Thomas and the Firework Display, Patience is a Virtue, Ode to Gordon, and the Engine Roll Call. For the record, I'm not going to go into extreme detail about these songs so as to not spoil everything I have to say when I eventually do my hit song ranking video. I'm going to try to keep them as decently short as I can. So let's start with our first, song, Sounds, or the Sound Song.
Wow! How original!
Well, to kick off the tape, it's not a bad choice. The song is actually quite catchy. I will admit it does sound a bit basic in the lyrics, but the onomatopoeia within the song is actually cleverly written. Rattling, clattering, whoosh, screeching, it actually gives you that feel of what a real steam engine would sound like. Plus the added sound effects make it all the more interesting and unique. Definitely a hidden gem within the hit era. Next we move on to our second song, Emily, or There's No One Quite Like Emily. Okay, what the is with these long-ass titles? What else is there to say other than this is a song that describes Emily as the character that she is? Which I don't think is exactly 100% correct. Like how things turn out wrong when she only meant good, but she's also misunderstood? Really? She's misunderstood when she's being a bitch throughout most of the series? Yeah, okay, let's go with that logic. One thing I can give it is that the instrumental at least sounds pretty good. It's not that bad of a song, but personally, it's not one of my favorites either. And now we get to our first episode, Thomas and the Tuba. It's Lady Hat's birthday, and Topham has arranged a brass band to play at the party. While picking up the band, Thomas accidentally leaves the tuba player behind. Thomas is then on a wild goose chase to find the tuba player and bring him to the party on time. Alright, this can't just be me, but am I the only one who thinks that in almost every other season, Lady Hat has to have either a decked out birthday party or some kind of celebration dedicated to her? What the is so special about her all of a sudden? Spoiled bitch. Anyway, for the first episode of Season 8, it's pretty decent. I especially like how this story gave more focus to the side characters of Thomas, that being Bertie, Elizabeth, and Trevor, who all play quite a big role transporting the tuba player across Sodor. And speaking of the tuba player, Brandon's voice is so freaking funny, and I love it. That particular voice would definitely fit a character such as this.
Can you take me to the party? He asked.
I'll take you as far as I can, said Bertie.
Thank you.
Also, say what the hell you want about Brandon, but I think he does a pretty good job here. He at least shows some kind of enthusiasm while he's narrating, which does make some of these episodes a little more tolerable to some degree. One final thing to point out is while we did get some nice panning shots throughout the course of the episode, music-wise was a bit underwhelming. Interesting choices of music, but nothing that really stood out. Again, this is in no way amazing, but I do think for a decent beginning episode, I think it deserves a respectable 8 out of 10. Up next comes our third song, Surprises. If you remember what I said during my review of Sodor Celebration, you already know that I'm not a fan of this song. I don't care for the short version, I don't care for the longer version. This song does absolutely nothing for me. Alright, I lied. There actually is one part in the longer version that I actually do kinda like, but the rest of the song, I don't give a damn about it. And now we move on to the next song, which is, oh my god, not this one! We have A World Around You. I don't know how more generic you could make such a basic song sound. The song explains to take in what we see from the locations of Sodor, but they're not explaining why the locations they mention are so special. If you think about it, this is the Island Song done wrong. Island Song at least painted a vivid picture of what Sodor is. What the hell is this one doing? Also, there is one line in this song that not only irks the shit out of me, but it's the most pointless and lazily written, and I think you know which line I'm referring to.
Shut up!
Save whatever sanity you have left and just skip this song. And that leads us into our fifth song, Determination. Now this song, on the other hand, is a freaking bop. I can't tell you how many times I would repeat this song. Now I'll admit, this song is way overly repetitive in the lyrics, but what definitely brings it up is the banging instrumental. It kind of sounds like something you could work out to with its fast-paced, motivational sounding beat. I should know because I've done that. Again, definitely repetitive, but it just makes it as one of the more tolerable hit-era songs. And we then fade into our last episode, Thomas and the firework display. James is to pick up fireworks in time for Sir Topham Hatt's firework display, but along the way he suddenly breaks down and Thomas is sent to find him in time before the festivities are cancelled. This is definitely one of some of the hidden episode gems within the hit era. The story starts off with James being his normal, boastful self when he's assigned to take the fireworks, whereas Thomas is over here pouting about it. Now, when you get to the middle end, when Thomas comes to James's rescue, some might say this part is milk to hell because, oh, friends help each other in the end. I get it, but the more I look into this particular dynamic, I think this sort of works for Thomas and James. Sure, they do tease each other in the beginning, but they at least know when to put their differences aside and get the job done. And we've seen this happen in multiple episodes. Whereas, say in comparison to Percy and James's dynamic, the two mainly get off on bickering at one another, trying to see who has the upper hand, until one or both get their ass handed to them. So in a way, I kinda like the dynamic of Thomas and James, just a teensy bit more. Other than the story, visual-wise, wow. The computer animation done for the fireworks is actually pretty well done. While a lot of fans say the hit era sucks as a whole, I think we can all agree that the special effects they did for some of the episodes are pretty freaking cool. Like I said before, this is a really fun, hidden gem within Season 8, and I think this episode deserves a 10 out of 10. And then we come to our next song, Patience is a Virtue, or simply just Patience. I know there's not a lot of fans who like this song, as it's mostly the same lyrics over and over and over again. I'm fully aware of that. But me, on the other hand, I kinda like this song. Preferably, the longer version. The first time I heard this, in a way, I actually felt kinda relaxed, in a sense, as that's what the song is pushing for. To relax and take your time with whatever you're doing. There's no need to rush. When I was younger, I used to rush around a lot, and I was very impatient. Now I take this song to heart, and I try to reflect that on my adult years. I'd go as far as to say this is probably one of my favorite guilty pleasures from the hit era Thomas songs. And moving on to the next song, we have Ode to Gordon. Oh joy. No surprise, but I don't like this song either. It's not even the fact that it's centered around Gordon. The song is just stupid. If this is supposed to be a proper ode, then it doesn't exactly fit Gordon as a character. The lyrics are so generically vague, and they don't tell us what we already don't know about Gordon as a character. And the instrumental really doesn't fit this song either. Gordon being a fast engine should have a much faster sounding song, not something that sounds like a freaking march. Just an overall annoying song. And technically our last song, quote unquote, we have the engine roll call. I don't even think I need to go into descriptive detail about why this song is so cringe to a ton of fans. The kids are not great, the lyrics are as bland as you can get for a STEAM team. Blech. Again, the only thing it really has going for it is that the instrumental is good. Nothing more. Can we just move on? So now what do I think of Songs from the Station? I'd say this is probably my second favorite, right behind Soda Celebration. What brings it down just slightly are some of the songs. Plain and simple, but I'm not crazy about certain ones. And some of you might feel a little differently about certain choices on the tape, and that's totally fine. Now as for the stories, I think it's pretty balanced out. You've got one that's either good or bad, depending on your opinion, and the other that's a really great one. Something else I do need to mention about the tape, as good as it is, it's also really not that special either. Think about it. We've already had 2 other releases that have done this format previously. A bunch of songs with 2 stories slapped in. Had this done something a little different, like a release with nothing but hit-era songs, something similar like the Sing Along with Thomas UK VHS, then I think this would have been a little more interesting. Oh wait. Nevertheless, I still believe this VHS is pretty enjoyable for the most part. I would recommend getting it for any collection, but if you're not really into the hit era in terms of stories or songs, then I would skip it entirely. And that does it for this review. Thank you all so much for watching, and be sure to check out my playlist for more Thomas reviews. Now, due to all the time I lost, I'm not too sure if I'm going to be able to do the amount of reviews I was originally planning. I'm only going to be able to do just a small handful right up until the end of June. In that regard, what is the next review going to be? Well, I'm kind of in the mood for another Season 5 release, and what better to cover than a VHS full of wild races, rescues, and runaways. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.